All right, in lesson 11.6, we're going to look at the surface area and volume of spheres. Now, these are the characteristics of a sphere. Okay, a sphere is a set of all points that are equidistant from a given point called its center. So it's like a circle, it's got that in common. A circle has a center, so does a sphere. A sphere has a radius and it has a diameter. A hemisphere is 1/2 of a sphere. Now, the formula for the surface area, this means all the outer edges, and that's going to be 4 pi r squared. So that means we have to know the radius in order to find the surface area. We'll use the letters SA to represent surface area in all of our formulas. All right, so let's take a look at our first example. The surface area, of course, we're going to write this down each time so we know what it is. They ask us to write the answer in terms of pi and then round to the nearest whole number. So we're going to get 2 answers for this. First thing I want you to do is identify your variables, which the only variable we have is our radius. Radius is going to be 10 in this. Now, as we plug this in, we'll have the surface area is equal to 4 times pi times 10 squared. Now, we know this is going to become 4 times 100 times pi, which means we're going to get 400 pi for our answer. Now, this is our first answer. In terms of pi, we're not going to calculate, let's leave the pi symbol in our answer. So now we're going to look at what is the decimal equivalent. And it says to round to the nearest whole number. So we take out our calculator, 400 times pi, or just 400 pi. That gives us 256.6, which means we're going to round the 6 up to a 7. So we have 1257. Now, there's no units in this, so this will be units and it's cubed. Excuse me, that's volume. Squared. So we have square units because it's, once again, we're looking for area. Even though it's surface area, it is still squared units. So 1,257 square units. Okay, let's try the next one. All right, you guys try this one. Notice they've been given the diameter, so we first need to find the radius. So pause your video, work this out, and you're going to round to the nearest terms of pi and then to the nearest whole number again. All right, so in this case, they gave us a diameter of 18. Remember, when they put the number in the middle of the line, that refers to the distance of that whole line. So 18, half of that means our radius is 9. So we plug our numbers in. 4 times pi times 9 squared, which is 81 times 4, which is 324 pi. This is your answer in terms of pi, and then your decimal equivalent. When you plug it in, you'll get 1,017.876, which is going to round to 1,018 square units. All right, so now let's take a look at what the volume formula is. The volume formula is 4/3 pi r cubed. Now, as you're calculating this, you're going to it's the same thing as multiplying by 4 and then dividing your answer by 3. So that's how you multiply by 4/3. So it's 4/3 pi r cubed. So we're looking for the volume, the amount of space that is inside the sphere. Once again, we're using the radius, so if they ever give you the diameter, remember to take half of it to find the radius. Find the volume of the sphere, write your answer in terms of pi, and then round to the nearest tenth. So we're rounding a little bit differently in our decimal equivalent, but in terms of pi will be the same. You're not going to calculate pi. So the first thing we need to do is identify our radius, which in this case is 3. So for the volume, we're going to get 4/3 pi times 3 cubed. Now that means it's 3 times 3 times 3. So that's 4 times pi times 27 over 3. Now, you can do this a couple different ways. You can plug this in your calculator and then divide it by 3, or you can simplify. And I choose to simplify here, so 3 goes into 27 9 times, and that leaves us with 9 times 4. So 9 times 4 is 36 pi. So the volume of this is going to be 36 pi, and the decimal equivalent will be 36 pi which gives us 113.09, and rounding to the nearest tenth, which gives us 113.1. This would be units cubed this time. For volume, it's cubic units. Okay, so once again, find the radius, plug your numbers in. You can simplify, but remember, do not calculate pi in your first answer. Okay, let's try the next one. They've given us the radius, so I want you to work this one out, put your answer in terms of pi, and then round to the nearest tenth. So pause your video, come back and see how you did. All right, so if we come back here, plug in 4 for our radius. The cube of that is going to be 64, so we have 4 times pi times 64. Now, because 3 cannot go into either one of these numbers here, we can't simplify it down any. So that means we're going to multiply 4 times 64 and get 256 pi over 3. This is considered in simplest form. Hasn't been any rounding at this point, so this is an exact answer in terms of pi. Now, the decimal equivalent would be 268.1, and since this is millimeters, our answer is going to be millimeters cubed. All right, so now let's take a look at these next few problems. Okay, we want to do 3 parts here. We want to find the surface area and volume of each sphere in terms of pi. So, I've given you 3 problems here. I want you to work through these. And you're going to find, for both, you're going to find the surface area and the volume for each when you have a radius of 5, a diameter of 16, and a sphere with a diameter of 4. Now, all you're doing is putting it in terms of pi. You're not going to write the decimal equivalent. So do this now, pause your video, and come back and see how you did. All right, so let's see how we did. Surface area with a radius of 5, we're going to end up with 25 times 4 times pi, which gives us 100 pi. For the volume, 5 cubed is going to give us 125 times 4 is 500 pi over 3. Because 3 can't go into 125 or 4, we end up with a fraction as our answer. So we go to the second one. We have a diameter of 16, which gives us a radius of 8. Plug our radius in, that gets square, it gets 64. 4 times 64 is 256 pi. For the volume, we're going to plug in 8 again as our radius. 8 cubed is 512 times 4 divided by 3. Now, 3 doesn't go into 4. 5 plus 1 is 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. So 3 does not go into 8 evenly. So 3 cannot go into 512 evenly. So our answer, you multiply 512 times 4, get 2048 pi over 3. And then our last one, we have a diameter of 4, radius of 2. So 2 squared is 4. 4 times 4 is 16 pi. For the volume, you get 4/3 pi r cubed. 2 cubed is going to be 8. 8 times 4 is 32. And 32 pi over 3 becomes our answer. All right. So this is just a quick check to see if you knew what you're doing. Now let's take a couple application problems. Now in example 5, it says the volume of a sphere is 5,000 cubic meters. What is its surface area to the nearest square meter? Now, in this case, we are trying to find the surface area given the volume, which means we need to identify the radius. So we're going to work our way backwards in order to find our radius. So we start with our equation for the volume, because that's what they gave us. Volume is equal to 4/3 pi r cubed. Now, if I'm going to solve for r, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have to get rid of everything else and then take the cube root of r cubed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 5,000 and plug it in for my volume. 5,000 is equal to 4/3 pi r cubed. Now, first thing we do is get rid of the 3. Get rid of the 3 by multiplying both sides by 3. That gives us 15,000 equal to, now it's just 4 pi r cubed because the 3's canceled. Next, we're going to get rid of the 4. So we're going to divide both sides by 4. And 15,000 divided by 4 is going to be 1,250 equal to pi times the radius cubed. So next we have to get rid of pi. So we're going to divide both sides by pi. Now I realize that pi is not going to go into this evenly, so I'm going to leave it like this for right now. So the radius cubed is equal to 1250 divided by pi. Now, so I'll write this here. Radius cubed is equal to 1250 divided by pi. So what I want to do is, if this was radius squared equal to this, I would take the square root of both sides. Well, when it's the cube, something's cubed, we have to take the cube root, which means there's a little 3 up here in our radical. So the cube root of both sides. Now, to kind of go down here and kind of explain what the cube root is again, you probably haven't seen it in a while. The cube root is trying to figure out what number is multiplied by itself to get this number. For instance, the cube root of 27. Well, what number is multiplied by itself 3 times to get 27? And that is going to be the number 3, because 3 times 3 times 3 gives us 27. 3 times 3 is 9, 9 times 3 is 27. So 3 is that number that is going to go into 27. So this is what we're going to be doing here. Now, I'll show you how to do this in your calculator in just a second. Okay, for instance, we're going to do the cube root of 27. So every calculator is different. Some calculators make you put it in. Mine, I have to actually go find the cube root under math. I have it under the 4th thing, shows me cube root, so I get 4 here. It brings me the cube root of 27, and then hit enter. So I'll have to kind of help each one of you find the cube root button on your calculator so you can know exactly how to plug it in. So let's go back here. So our radius is going to be equal to the cube root of 1250 over pi. Now you could put this in decimal form and round to 4 decimal places, or you can leave it exact form like this. So now we're going to go back to what we're looking for. We're looking for the surface area. So surface area is equal to 4 pi r squared. So we found our radius. We're going to plug it in here. So 4 times pi times our radius. Well, our radius is the cube root of 1250 over pi. And we take our radius and we're going to square it. So pretty much the rest of this is going to be done in the calculator. We're going to calculate the cube root of 1250 divided by pi. Then we're going to square it, multiply it by 4, and then by pi. So let's get out our calculators and go through the motions. So once again, I'm going to find my cube root button, so you need to find your cube root button on your calculator. So mine's going to be 4. So now I'm going to take 1250. You want to make sure that after you divide it by pi, it's still under the radical. So the cube root of 1250 divided by pi. I'm going to hit enter. So this is actually my radius. My radius is 7.35506. So if you wanted to write down this, if you wanted to calculate and use this decimal form, you could do that, just round to about 4 decimal places, and you would get the same answer. So now I'm going to square it. So I'm going to take and raise this to the 2nd power. That squares my radius. Now I'm going to multiply it by 4. So we're going to say times 4. And the last one is going to be times pi. So I'm going to multiply this answer times pi. And that gives me my answer of 679.8. And the directions say to the nearest square meter, which means this 8 is going to round this up to a 10, which is going to round this up to an 8. So we get approximately 680 square meters. All right, so I'm looking back here and I see an error I made. 15,000 divided by 4 is not 1250. 15,000 divided by 4 is 3,750. So let's go back and change this. So it'll change our radius by a little bit here. Okay, so this will be 3750. This right here will be 3750. And so it'll change what we get here. So not a lot to change here, but just a little bit. So now, we'll still go back to our calculator, and do 3750. So go back to the cube root of 3750 divided by pi, and it gives us 10.6. So this is approximately our radius here, so then I'm going to square it. So I'm going to raise it to the second power. And now I'm going to multiply it by 4. And now times pi. That gives us 1414.0, so this answer will end up being 1,414 square meters. All right, sorry about that. So you got to calculate it twice. So now, let's move on to the next one. In the last example here, we've got the volume. We're trying to find the volume given the surface area. So it's going to be kind of backwards here. So we're going to start off with the surface area formula, plug in 435 for our surface area, and we're going to try to find our radius so we can plug it in and find the volume. So pause the video, try to work this one out on your own, and come back and see how you did. All right, so let's see if we have it set up correctly. So you have the surface area is equal to 4 pi r squared. Plug in 435 for our surface area, and begin solving for the radius. So to start by dividing by 4. It gives us 108.75. Now we divide by pi. And so since this is not going to be a perfect number, whole number here, we're going to leave it under the radical like this. We take the square root of both sides, and we get 108.75 divided by pi all under the square root. So that is our radius. So now we're going to go back and plug it in for our radius into our volume formula, and we're going to cube it, multiply it by 4 times pi, and then divide by 3. So let's start, and I want to kind of walk you through this again. So in this case, we're going to start with the square root. So regular square root button, square root of 108.75 divided by pi. So that is our radius. Now we're going to cube it. So we're going to raise this to the third power. Gives us 203.666. Now we're going to divide it by, multiply by 4. Multiply by pi. And our last step is to divide by 3. So that gives us 853.11. So the nearest whole number, the volume would be 853. And our units here are going to be yards, so it's going to be cubic yards. All right, so this concludes our lesson on surface area and volume of spheres.